It's good to be here today. We have a great session on arts education. Needless to say, this is a challenging time for all of us and certainly for educators. But if anyone is up for a challenge, it's arts educators who are amazing. But if you're an arts educator, you know that you've been working 3 times as much as normal probably, and your normal's probably working twice as much already. So today we're going to take some time to get some tips and some guidance and some concrete advice from teachers on how to teach remotely or hybrid during the time of COVID. And we have an outstanding group of teachers. I'm going to introduce the 3 of them now and then hand it over to the first, Brenda. And then we'll have a discussion, and keep in mind that we'll also have Q&A at the end. So keep those questions coming. First, I would like to introduce Brenda Torres-Figueroa. She's an integrated arts teacher at Chicago High School for the Arts, or CHI Arts. Brenda graduated from the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, and soon after moved to Chicago to pursue her Master's of Fine Arts from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And Brenda is also an alum of Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. And she's participated and developed multiple collective exhibitions and performances both in Chicago and Puerto Rico. After Brenda presents, we'll hear from Lindsey Johnson. And Brenda teaches at a high school, and Lindsey teaches 6th and 8th grade visual art, of course, middle school, at River Forest District 90. And she is a lifelong creative. Lindsey is thrilled to merge her personal and professional interests to have the opportunity to teach middle school art. She is a 2-time Fund for Teachers Fellow and an NEA Global Learning Fellow. And she's currently studying the arts and culture of the Middle East with a teacher program for the Qatar Foundation International. And then certainly last but not least, we have Courtney Leach, who teaches K-4 elementary music at Sullivan Elementary School and directs the Sullivan Children's Choir. She's also the Illinois Music Education Association's District 5 president. And Courtney has spent 22 years teaching primarily band in Central Illinois area before moving to general music full-time. She has a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Music from Ball State University and a Master's of Music from Eastern Illinois University. And then later, we'll hear from Nicole Upton of Ingenuity, and I'll introduce her after the panel discussion. But what a great group of teachers we have, and we look forward to learning from them. And so Brenda, you're gonna get us started, and I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Good evening, everybody. As Jonathan said, I'm Brenda Torres-Figueroa. I am a teacher at the Chicago High School for the Arts, also known as CHI Arts. This is my 5th year at CHI Arts. I've been keeping the Humboldt Park community very close to my heart. Since I've moved to Chicago 20 years ago, I moved here, and indeed CHI Arts is at the at the center of this community. I wanted to share a little bit of more information about what I teach and how I teach it, and how this experience that we still live in is very present to all of us, had shaped even my practice as an art educator. So first, at the Chicago High School for the Arts, the class that I teach, I have only seniors, right? Students that are ready to transition out of high school. And they have been taking, it's a conservatory school, one of the few public schools, right, in the nation. Students are there from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day. So they have at least, they have 3 hours of arts instruction a day. I am in the part of the academic team, so I am during the day teaching integrated arts. And I have students from all of the conservatories. So mainly my class focuses on collaboration, on collaborative practice. And, you know, there's a lot of professional development that we share with the, you know, young artists, since they have been working towards, you know, being in a pre-professional kind of setting in the arts. So this time, and I'm thinking about, like, you know, one of the things that make me reflect during this process of, you know, working through the questions that Jonathan shared with us, is like the comparison between week 1 of remote learning and the third week of school now, right? We have like 7 months almost that have passed. I have been in my building like twice since then, in comparison to be there every single day and for many, many hours. And I just wanted to reflect a little bit of that, of what is the meaning of time, and how as an art educator, but also working in the field as an artist, right? Because I'm also like, you know, after 3 o'clock, I change my seat and I'm working in my studio with many different pieces that I share with many different people. But at the same time, how this experience have shaped me develop a different type of connection with my students, a different type of connection with the families, a different type of connections even with my own art practice. So for me, it is extremely important to kind of look at the tools that are available, since I'm not, you know, even that my background is mainly in visual arts. I also teach performance artists, right? I teach dancers, I teach musicians, I teach creative writers, I teach visual artists, I teach like the actors, right? So how do I fit this new reality to their process of being connected back home? And I wanted to bring, like, they were at home, they were in school from 8 to 5. So for them, that was by itself, it was a huge change, right? Because they're most of the day they're spending at school. We have some students that they have a commute and an hour and a half of 2 hours, right, to come back and forward from school. And that's something that we really needed to have in consideration. What make our scholars who they are, right? And how we can take this time to help them process, right, some ideas that they have about themselves as they transition out of high school, but not even knowing what was ahead of them, right? Some of them, they were accepted into wonderful colleges. The colleges closed back and they have to come back to their homes and do remote learning from there. So we have to adapt to all those circumstances. And for that, for me as an art educator, I have to be the super more flexible person as possible and be open to learn with my students in many different ways and forms, and learn about the multiple tools that I can use to help them not only to address or learn, but also to engage with each other and continue that process of collaboration. So, you know, I'll be happy to answer more questions or to share a little bit more of details of the particular tools that I'm using in my classroom. I'm fully teaching from home. As you can see, I'm teaching from my studio. And I will be more than happy to share more information with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. Appreciate it. And we'll circle back for the panel discussion. Lindsey, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, welcome. Good night. Good evening to everyone. I'm just going to do a quick screen share. So I can't see your faces, but I can see the panelists. Can everybody see my screen? We should all feel really comfortable saying that. So my name is Lindsey Johnson, and I teach in middle school. So 6th, 7th, and 8th, we are 100% remote, but the teachers teach from the building, unless you have a medical exemption. We went through lots of changes, as have many of you, and we were daily 45 minutes every day, and now we moved not only online, but to block scheduling. So that was something new for us here. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with UDL, Universal Design for Learning. You might know this graphic right here, but that's something that my district has been talking a lot about. And we did this book study called The End of Average. And after my freakout sessions and my frantic emails back and forth to the curriculum director, I had this aha moment that, oh, okay, this is this in practice, right? There is no average. There's no average pandemic experience. There's no average home experience for what the children are going to have access to or not have access to, and to just embrace it. So like Brenda said, I feel like once I had that mind shift and was like, you have to be flexible, flexible, flexible. And instead of looking at these as all negatives and limiting, why not, reframe that and see it as limitless? You don't have this one material, but you have a different material. And so once I stopped maybe fighting what life was handing to me and just accepting it, I think I was able to breathe easier and wrap my head around how school would look different. So just a couple of examples. For example, we were studying Japanese art and kintsugi, which is that when the ceramics break and then you put it back together, with gold, then you've made something new. Well, we didn't have a kiln at home and we couldn't continue on with that project, for example, but we all had paper and we could, for example, draw something we were looking forward to that we could no longer do and rip it up and put it back together and create some beautiful artwork from that. Again, realizing in the fall that community building was going to be most important. That's just been drilling into my head and something that I've been really intentional with our students. So we made an assemblage of artifacts that showed our identity and our personality. And last spring, we just drew our own still lifes. But this fall, because we're not in the same room together, but still, need to know who else is in my class and let me make, relationships. Now we're also taking time to draw each other's still lifes and learning more about each other that way, asking them questions. We also have like daily attendance that isn't just, are you here and where did you go and how come I can't hear or see you, but there's a question. And we are drawing together during that community building. What's been filling your cup? What was depleting your cup and draining your energy? And so just really being intentional about community building at a distance has been, I would say, my top priority. And the kids have been more open because of it, more willing to talk because they know that even though you're not here, I see you, I hear you, and I care. So again, being flexible, number one, but also being responsive. So you're gonna take some stuff online and you'll make some changes, but it's still not happening in a vacuum. And I think people are most successful when they are acknowledging what's happening in the world and then incorporating it. And that's hard. It's really, really hard. And we all have lives outside of work. But even if you take one or two things that you're seeing in the news and bringing it into the classroom, I think students really appreciate that. So for example, we have a street art unit in 7th grade, and then where we would decorate things around the school, but it seemed really appropriate to bring in how our artists creating street art now during a pandemic around the world. And so, on the left, you see, this is what it used to look like when we were in school and decorating trash cans, but now we get to be home and we can show our neighbors, we could show our people that are passing by up and down the street. So again, that mind shift from limited to limitless, I think has been really helpful for me. And then the last slide I have to share too is that one thing that's really difficult, what I guess I should say used to think was difficult was not being right there in real time to give kids feedback. But now we have devices that have cameras, at least in my district. we sent all the children home with iPads, and so they have cameras. And even if they're not making something digital, the ability to take a photo of your work in progress and share it with the teacher and to get that real-time feedback has made it feel a lot smoother. So we're separate, but we're not separate, you know, alone together.
Thank you, Lindsey. We appreciate your presentation. And I should let people know, is it okay that we share your slides after the session? Okay, great. So now I'm gonna hand it over to Courtney. We've heard high school, we've heard middle school, we're going to elementary school now and to another part of the state. And Courtney has been teaching hybrid as opposed to just remote. So Courtney, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, good evening, everyone. I am currently teaching in a rural district in the central portion of Illinois. I'm a little bit unique with the two other panelists because we are in person right now. And we see the students every day. There's no A days, there's no B days. I see every student every single day. We do have about 10% of our school population that is currently remote learning. So teachers in our district are providing in-person instruction along with remote teaching. Now, as an art or a music teacher here in our district, I am not able to have any face-to-face connections with my remote students. So as I've been planning my lessons this year, I'm having to be as creative as possible in order to remind those students the fun things that we can do in music class without them actually getting to see my face or hear me sing or hear me play any type of instrument. So I've been able to do a lot of sessions this summer with a lot of music teachers all over the state. And I've been very lucky that I've gotten some really good advice from some teachers. So the best advice I can give anyone, as a lot of us will eventually hopefully be in person in the next couple months, is that you really need to plan for in-person instruction, but you need to teach as if your students are already remote. So the best thing that I did was really look at what it is I teach already and looking at my lessons and the things that are important in my music class and how can I present those to not only my in-person students, but I'm teaching my in-person students right now as if we are already in remote teaching. Granted, they are getting a little bit extra from me than my the remote students just because I don't have that one-on-one or that connection with video to talk with them. But I'm having to recreate things. So just in case things would go poorly or we would have a run on a lot of cases in our district and we would have to go to full remote, my students are now prepared to do full remote. So I think I'm gonna actually share my screen. And so for those of you, maybe I will share my screen. We will, my students currently, am I sharing? Jonathan, am I sharing? Maybe. Jonathan, am I sharing? Can you see my screen? Okay, good. I just want to make sure. So, so I'm going to show you, I'm going to just give you, like, this is a slideshow. I've kind of gone to like a slideshow kind of format and my teaching right now, and I just went away from my screen. Hello. And what has happened with my, with these slideshows is I've had to set up, with my internet, of course, is now slow. I've had to set, and welcome to Remote Teaching with Internet Problems. In rural Illinois, we have quite a bit of rural internet issues all over the place, and I've had to learn all kinds of fun tools, and maybe they'll load. I did kind of jump on the Bitmoji situation there with, just because I'm trying to engage elementary students and I'm trying to make it fun for them. So you can see me waving, and I also, the PE teacher is on the same page. So the PE teacher and I are working together, and so we can give the students, so the parents don't have as much to go back and forth between, to make it a little easier. And now finally we have my screen. So as I go through my slideshows, I've tried to make them as fun and as interesting as possible. The kids think it's really funny to see what Mrs. Leach is going to be dressed up as from day to day. But I thought it would be really smart in my teaching if I did a lot of our listening lessons at the beginning of the year, because if you have any knowledge of what had been going on with the aerosol studies, that playing instruments and singing is not the greatest thing to do for long periods of time, I decided to do our listening lessons. So we started with pictures of an exhibition. I've had to be very, very specific with everything that I type, because I have to look at this as if I am not, or the students obviously are not seeing me read it, so I have to be very, very specific. We do not have art in our school, so I always try to draw and pull in a little bit of art into our program. So if you know pictures at an exhibition, you know what a little bit of this is about. So there's lots of videos and lots of things that students can look at as they go through the slideshows. I'll be glad to share my website with everyone at the end and show you some other of the slideshows and all the grade levels that I teach. I do teach K through 4. One thing that I did learn, and I didn't think about this, is when we're doing my listening lessons, we're learning about the different instruments. And part of learning about the instruments is actually having the teacher play the instruments for you. And it didn't dawn on me that, wait a minute, I can't play the instruments for them this year. So I've had to be very creative with videos, with just show and tell, with recording myself. I have found that video-wise and recording-wise, if you record on iPads or other devices, your recordings come in as MP4s. Google Slides does not like to play MP4s very well. So I've learned how to convert MP4s to MP3s. All the young teachers out there probably find that very easy, but as an older, I've never needed to convert anything. So there have been some digital platform issues throughout our teaching that we're kind of working through. But I will say, as you are getting ready to go back into the classroom, at any point, I feel like it could go remote. We've had very few cases in our district, so we're very lucky. But plan your in-person lessons as if you could be remote. And I'm telling you, I'm way more organized than I ever have been right now. And a lot of it's because everything has to be absolutely perfect for an entire week's worth of lessons that I'm sending out to my students. So again, I will be glad to share anything I possibly have. And if you have any other questions for me, I will be glad to answer those as well.
Great. Thank you, Courtney. So we have some time now to have a little bit of discussion before we move into looking at kind of a larger view. And just a reminder to people who are on this session now, who are attending, if you have questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A section, and we'll get to those questions towards the end of the session. So the first question that I have, and these questions are for all of you, so feel free to chime in at any time. One of the things that we struggle with in education, and that also includes arts education, of course, is the idea or the struggle, the crisis of inequity. And one of the things with remote learning, especially, but also with hybrid, is how to connect with students in a way that addresses those inequities, or in a way that ensures that some students are not left behind in this new learning environment. So are there ways that teachers can keep that in mind when they're teaching in this new environment of COVID?
They definitely need to keep that in mind during these times of COVID. I think for me, that has been at the forefront, working in Chicago, working with already the difficulties and challenges that many of our students face because of our city, because of our race dynamics, because of our disparities dynamics. So we have to be very, very conscious of what does that mean to be working from home, when we potentially might have some students that they don't have a home. It's not just about access to internet, but having the possibility of them not having a stable living situation. So we have to be extremely, extremely knowledgeable of using multiple tools, not just like, it's like, this is the glorified like toolbox for teachers right now, because we really are demanded to use everything that we know and have, but also the compassion, all the means of compassion that we have to understand and guide our students, not just to continue working autonomously, right, and getting their skills, but also like working with their families as a unit, because now families as well, they become our students, they become part of us and their learning experience. So I think that that's something that for me has to be at the forefront when we are teaching our students, particularly through art, and letting them know that there's art in everything, right? In their homes, in their spaces, in everything, and every way. I love what Lindsey did about the street art, and they brought that home. Some of my students were cooking, and we were sharing recipes. That was the first time that they were cooking, right? And it was a beautiful connection, and they were documenting and journaling how they learned these new recipes with their grandmothers, with their mothers, and stuff like that. So it's like, being able to kind of shift our curriculum to kind of align with the reality at the moment.
For visual arts too, I would say to not be tied to the product, and to care more about the process, because like we mentioned earlier, there is no average. Even in my own home, I realized we didn't have paper clips. I don't have paper clips in my own house. And I'm an art teacher, scissors. So you can't assume that people are going to have materials. And even this fall, we had the luxury of being able to get into the building early and make supply kits and send them home. And there are students who lost their sketchbook already. Like, it happened. or a sibling came in and took something to it, or they cut up the wrong piece of paper, or they painted on the wrong thing. And that just goes back to flexible. And it's not so much that everything all looks the same, but that people have gained the main idea from the process that they were supposed to learn from that lesson. I think that's most important. And equity, so often we think about in economic standpoint too. And again, the flexibility sometimes, even in my cases, on a random Thursday, their parent had to do something and now they're at a friend's house. And they just found out this morning and they have art class today. So they didn't bring any of their supplies, or they forgot they had art class today. So the less rigid we are, the more we help them breathe, the more we help them understand that there's not one right way of doing the work and the learning. And that's a life skill.
Yeah.
I think the challenge that I've had with elementary students is to tell a kindergartner, you need to read a slideshow and go learn how to do this. Really, it doesn't happen. If you've ever been in a room with kindergartners before, a lot of them. So even the ones at home with their parents, a lot of them cannot access anything that we're doing unless they have a parent, they have an older sibling, they're with a babysitter. So we have had some issues with students that just don't have that home support that some of the other ones do. Our school did send all of our students have iPads, so they do have the technology, but that doesn't mean that someone plugged the technology in and it works, or someone else wasn't using it when they weren't supposed to, or it ended up here and they didn't have it there, or the internet where they are is not working. And so there's been multiple issues like that. So those things you really do, flexibility is the key with it. And just understanding that any contact I think we have with the students at all is better than zero contact that we kind of went through a while in the spring with them. So any little bit that they can accomplish on what you've asked them to do with your classes is better than nothing. And these, generally with my elementary kids, these are the activities they're really excited to do. On the flip side, I've had a lot of parents are now becoming more engaged in what we're doing, and the students remote-wise are talking more with their parents about what's actually going on in the music class and what they learned about this painting and how it related to the music that they did. So there has been a positive on both sides. There's positives and negatives with all of these things. So it is definitely a flexibility thing, and just making sure that any contact is better than nothing at all.
And Lindsey, I think that my son is one of those people who've lost his sketchbook. So I just, so the flexibility is appreciated. But just to kind of to build on that, and just to scope out a little bit, what would you say? Because the Alliance, of course, and a lot of our partner organizations do advocacy, and with the concern that the remote or hybrid environment might increase the inequities that exist, what advice or what things do you think our leaders, our education leaders, need to keep in mind as we go through this time and eventually emerge out of it, in terms of not allowing it or dealing with any increase in inequity that may come?
I think one thing, I'm sorry, I'm gonna jump in quick on this one. I'll be really fast, but I think it would be great if the messages remain consistent. I think as an educator right now, every week we're coming out, there's a different guideline, or, oh no, we changed our minds, so now we can do it this way. And oh no, now we're gonna do it this way. It would be nice for the students, with just our ability to help those students have access to what we're doing. We need some consistency. Today, there was another document coming out from IC and IDPH about music, again, and what is appropriate in-person music and what is not appropriate. So it's more guidance. It's actually guidance from August from another study, but it does make it very difficult to provide these things and to find ways to help the students that need help when things are consistently changing, or, oh wait, let's just change our mind and start again. And I know things have to be able to change, but I think there's a lot of guidance that is changing very rapidly, and it would be consistency. It would be nice for a couple weeks, I think, for me personally.
I wish there was a thing called flexible consistency, right?
Yeah.
And we can manage through that. I think for me, like, aside of the situation and disparities that already exist in the city of Chicago, I would have to say, like, it's within my biggest concern, my DO students, right? And how the impact of the pandemic, right, and remote learning, how to already kind of like put a bigger gap, or a bigger kind of distance, between us being able to reach them like we used to, right? We have some students that require, for example, one-on-one checking every 15 minutes, like, their accommodations in many different ways and forms. And because of that, some of the parameters that are placed on ourselves, right, as teacher, to Google Meet, or to whatever we do our meetings, it is very hard, almost sometimes impossible, to reach some of the students that need us the most, and that have benefited from arts education the most. So one of the things that I really wish that we can reflect on is, like, how how we can actually serve our students, our students with special needs, and DO students, and those with emotional needs better.
I think your original question asked about what leaders can do for equity, right? And I'm kind of relating it to another question I see in the chat. I think that it's most helpful if leaders are aware of the layers of issues that people that are affecting people. Again, no average, in many different ways. And I think it's helpful for teachers to not operate out of assumptions, but then also us all to be trained on language we should and should not be using, for example, and strategies that would be most appropriate during times like these. And I think about it, especially in the fall now, we're doing a much better job of our social workers have Zooms, our counselors have Zooms. So my students are still popping out and saying, okay, I've got to go see the social worker now. And I think, you know, when the leaders are not looking at, you know, everything through a classroom teacher lens, and thinking about, we have all of these other adults in the building, how can they be supporting our families? How can they be supporting our children? Then that helps us lead the charge, right? You can't put it all on the classroom teacher alone. And so for the specialists to be educating the teachers, and the specialists to have time with the students, and then the parents also to be trained. You know, for example, our technology specialist has had trainings with parents, both whole group and one-on-one when they need help. So really just utilizing all the bodies that we have in these buildings that can be a support system.
Are there specific, I mean, I know there's a lot out there, and Courtney, you talked about, you know, different factors coming in, but are there resources or tools that you found just to be particularly helpful during this big time?
I think for me personally, having dedicated time for office hours, right? And having more flexibility, even though that the periods in my school are shorter, but having that flexibility of establishing office hours with that I can communicate with parents kind of earlier than later, right? Because in a regular school time, right, it will be like around 2 o'clock, and we will have meetings. So it's like mainly having that flexibility as well. In specific tools, you mean like tools that we use on a daily basis to communicate with students, or in general?
Yeah, actually, either tech tools that you use that you found helpful, or even mental tools just to get through the day. Either one of those.
Okay, so for example, one of the things that is I have to accommodate and make my space to look as much as possible as my classroom. I went back to my classroom. As I said, I've been there 2 times. I brought a few of the pieces that my students made last year from class of 2020. I put them up, like, you know, so I can, you know, I have my bamboo, you know, tree, like, you know, I have many different things that my humidifier, I have many different things that actually help me center and be feeling that I'm in my classroom, and this space is like dedicated exclusively for that. But in terms of the tools, like, you know, in my school, we use Google Meets, like, as well as a CPS. I've been finding very helpful. Using tools for collaboration as Padlet. We share a lot of information via Padlet. The students can add their images, they can add text, they can add videos, they can add many different things, and all of them can, you know, share and comment from each other pieces. I really like that. Is very popular in my school, Nearpod as well, using Google Slides, using many different interlink, like using many different things to kind of share the do nows, having a very consistent thing with the agendas with the students. You know, we're trying many different tools. Like we have kind of, and that's one of the things that I appreciate. Almost every week we have access to a tech person, right? That they share like different tools with us that we can communicate with the students. Some of my students have told me that it's a little bit overwhelming because some of the teachers are using different things and that can be also, you know, kind of an overload. It's like, whoa, I'm here. I went from Snapchat to TikTok, and then you give me all this a world of technology. Like, you know, it's like little by little, I'm introducing a new tool that we use for learning. So that has worked for me marvelous.
I would say like the number one thing, don't feel like you have to know every single tool. And yeah, there are some people who know some really cool things to do. Sometimes it's just not doable, or the time for you to put that together. You have to worry about yourself as well in this. It's hard to be a really good example and to keep the kids at the emotional state that they need to be at during a pandemic like this if you're not there yourself. I mean, my number one advice is use your friends, use your resources. I called a friend, my MP4s won't play. How do I convert an MP4 to MP3? He goes, oh, here's a website. It takes you like 2 minutes, and here you go, click, click. Okay, well, that just saved 400 hours of time for me, I feel like, because I didn't have to Google it 100 times or watch another YouTube video on how to create a Bitmoji classroom, which they're lovely, but they take a long time. So I think you just need to remember that you don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to have know how to do every single thing that's out there. Breathe, slow, talk to your friends. One of the things I've done with our ILMEA district is I've had Zoom happy hours or just a talk session for the band director. What are things that are working for you? What are not working for you? What are, what can you, how are you planning to start your beginning band students, which has been an issue for most band areas? How are you singing in your classroom with your choirs? What kind of, examples are you able to provide in those things? So just bringing some of the teachers in our area together just to really talk about what are the best things that you can do, but those things are the best things for your own social and emotional learning, and therefore you can help your students. So definitely use your friends. You have lots of friends. We all have lots of resources that way. Do one thing at a time and breathe. It'll all be fine. It will.
I totally agree. I don't know if it counts, but the clock is a tool that I think has become my friend. And if I'm totally honest, when we were all in the building and it was 45 minutes a day, schools can be frantic places. Rush, rush, rush. We don't have time for this. We don't have time for that. We've got to get down to business. But now that we have these long block schedules and we're not in physical proximity with each other and we're in the middle of a Noah's Ark moment, I'm really just finding that the time is my friend, the clock is my friend. And what is most important in this time to happen? It's not rushing and then dealing with the fallout of all the questions because people were nodding along like they got it, but they really didn't understand it. And so taking that space to ask questions and have wait time, which we know in a classroom how important wait time is. And it's even more important when you're remote because it takes a while to mute and unmute yourself. Or there's a technology lag and they didn't hear what you said the first time. So embracing the wait time, there's technology trouble and taking the time to troubleshoot it so that that child doesn't feel shame for not understanding it or getting a few steps behind. I'm on Zoom, so we use screen share very often, very, very often. And it's not just me presenting what I'm doing, but the other students are doing the screen share and then walking people through the steps because it's just like, eating healthy and taking care of your body. If you don't do it on the front end, you're going to figure it out on the back end. So let's take our time now and make sure everybody understands this process and everybody's clear and do that, long attendance check-in in the day. Hey, how are you approaching us today? Are you feeling depleted or are you feeling energized? And that also connects to, we have an advisory at our middle school, and we meet once a week with a group of kids, and it's the same group of kids you'll have through the course of middle school. But we've been teaching mindfulness strategies, which is most important during this time, right? So checking in on their breathing, checking in on sounds that they hear and feels that they feel. So I guess I would say, embrace this time and all of that hurried normal school business. Like, we don't have to subscribe to that anymore.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsey. We're going to move to Nicole Upton now. Ingenuity, one of our partners here in Chicago, held a process called the Arts Ed Response Collective that took kind of a broader view of what arts organizations should do and what we need to think of on a larger scale. And so we're going to bring Nicole in to talk about that. Nicole is the Director of Partnerships and Professional Learning at Ingenuity. She previously worked for the CPS Department of Arts Education and has also served as the Senior Director of Education at the Auditorium Theater. She has served as a high school theater arts teacher and a director and a stage manager. She knows the whole situation. She has a BA in Comprehensive Theater Studies from Northern Illinois University and an MA in Educational Theater from New York University. So Nicole, I'm gonna hand it off to you. And then when you're done, we'll all get together and answer some questions from some of the attendees.
Great, thanks, Jonathan, and thank to all of you teachers. This is really inspiring to hear just what you're doing on behalf of our students. And I realize I am probably the thing that is keeping you from your debate pre-gaming here, so I'll be quick and to the point. But thanks for the opportunity to talk about the Arts Ed Response Collective. As Jonathan said, you know, we really began this process to hear about the challenges that emerged from COVID specifically, to provide some technical assistance, to really then begin to create a sector-wide understanding and kind of an action plan for how do we move forward in this very uncertain time. And as we all know, what happened was kind of the convergence of many things. Our world became not just about COVID response, but also responding to the police murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Tony McDade, and even the most recent shooting of Jacob Blake. So these disparities that emerged were rooted in systemic racism, were already becoming apparent through COVID and the pandemic itself. On top of that, the arts organizations were really working very hard on trying to figure out what their future would look like. Earned revenues just drying up overnight, donor priorities potentially shifting to health and human services, and certainly lots of question marks and lack of confidence about what the next year holds. So it was really those three pieces coming together that necessitated the ARC report. And Jonathan, was somebody going to share the slides?
Yes, we certainly can, or you can screen share too, either way.
Oh, okay, I think we got it. There we go. So there's that little visual. Thank you. So next slide, please. There were really three leading indicators, kind of three actions that were the big takeaways from this ARC report. And I think Demi is going to drop the link to the full report in the chat so you can reference it. And these should sound pretty familiar based on what we just heard from the teachers on this panel. I'm going to give you a really quick taste of some of the things that an arts organization may want to begin to ask themselves in each of these kind of key action areas. So the first action area was radical flexibility. And this action is really about adapting to the changing circumstances and preparing for those ongoing changes ahead. So organizationally, some of the questions you might want to think about are, have you created an internal rapid response team that's comprised of mixed leadership from the organization to really figure out how you're going to do decision making and strategize as state and guidance at the districts that you're working with evolves and changes. You know, we know here in Chicago, we're currently in a remote situation that may be hybrid soon. We want to be prepared. So how are we preparing? And what happens even internally if someone on your team is exposed or becomes ill, or if your local cases spike? How can you really be ready for those potential circumstances and situations that come up? The second piece is really about knowledge sharing and professional learning, which we're doing here certainly, and I think a lot of us are really coming back to our networks and colleagues for this piece. This action is all about connectivity, resources, and tools. So some of the questions an arts organization may want to ask themselves is what are you thinking about trauma-informed training right now and social emotional learning? We know that this pandemic and the kind of confluence of issues at hand are really stressing our students out. How are we kind of adapting the programs that we do to a virtual space to address those needs that they have? Do we have professional learning in place for the teams that we're working with, for our teaching artists that are working with students? And how do we kind of embed professional development into the work that we're doing? And the third piece of this plan is really about racial justice, economic parity, human dignity, and really amplifying what it is we mean by equity. So this action is all about holding ourselves accountable for thoughtfully pursuing policies and implementing programs that are designed to achieve those ends. So, for example, how is your curriculum or your content decentering whiteness? Is it culturally responsive? How are you demonstrating that? Is your curriculum culturally aware? How do you know? And then at an organizational level, are you committed to undoing racism and economic disparities in your programs, in your policies, in your communications, in your operational structure? And what steps are being made to ensure that progress? All three of these pieces coming together are hugely important for our sector as a whole to really consider and to lean on and to question ourselves about how we move forward. Without these pieces, our progress, I think, through this is going to be really challenging. So exercise that radical flexibility, lean on each other and resources that are already existing to really deepen your knowledge, and really make sure that what you're doing is genuinely and authentically rooted in equity, unapologetic equity in everything that we do. So I hope you'll check out the ARC report, take a broader look at it. We've got lots of great guiding questions for partners, for philanthropy, and even a lot of recommendations for our own organization and how we're committed to making these changes and acting as a model as best we can.
Thank you, Nicole. So now we're going to turn to questions that have been submitted by attendees, and we have a number of them. I should emphasize too that to everyone who's on the webinar, that our panelists have been very generous in providing their contact information, and so it's in the chat. We'll provide a slide at the end if you have questions that you would like to follow up. One question, though, and any of you can jump in on this. The question is, do you feel like you have time for outside arts partners this year, or will there be too much screen fatigue to add another lesson onto your own lesson?
Well, I just typed in a response. I'm not sure if the question goes away after you do that. I was part of the Nasher Sculpture Center in Dallas. They have a museum forum for educators every summer. Pass it on. And there was one this past fall. It's phenomenal. Like all 5 museums in the Dallas area, they connect and they offer something, which actually would be a great idea if we did that in the Chicagoland area too. But one thing that they had were virtual field trips. So it's not just go to the website and click on it and look for stuff, but they had like sign up for a time, and the curator or the arts educator who worked at the museum would walk you through and do a lesson based on a piece that's in the museum. And I haven't signed up for it yet, but it's on my to-do list. But it felt much more engaging than here's a website, go to it. So I think that would be something that classroom teachers would be open to. And with regards to the screen fatigue, I personally don't give the students homework, and I don't think that most of the teachers here, regardless of subject, give kids homework because they have so much screen time. So if it could somehow work within our hours, which I know sometimes museums have, it can be from 12 to 12:30 or 12:30 to 1:30, and that doesn't always fit with the school schedule, so our periods. So if outside organizations were able to be flexible and work with the teacher on the times that they had available, then I think it'd be more likely that people would incorporate you into their curriculum.
Another question, we tried to have as many different artistic disciplines as we could, but a question about drama and theater. What experiences or ideas for drama theater over a virtual format have any of you experimented with or heard about? I'm kind of looking at you, Brenda. You're the most personal.
Well,
Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I don't necessarily, during that time, I have students from the theater conservatory and, my colleagues that are in the theater department. You probably, if people, I would love to give you some information about the wonderful stuff that they did with the kids during conservatory. I know there were many difficulties because we were caught in the middle of rehearsals for all the curtain calls. So they were already kind of productions in queue, right? To be able to go and move forward. So most of the stuff has to be redesigned and relearned to be adapted to the virtual world, to have recorded pieces that our students are not necessarily used to it. They are used to live performances, right? They had to record the pieces. They have to relearn how to perform for the camera, how to use lighting in many different ways and forms. So even now that they are studying theater and they have to do different pieces with costumes, that is very difficult, to even distribute in the time of COVID because of, health reasons, right? So it is very challenging, but I will be more than happy to share some of the contacts that we have at the school. We have amazing theater teachers and the department is extremely extraordinary. So I'll be happy to share, and I think they will be happy to share with you guys what they have done with the kids during their conservatory time.
Great, and if people have resources or tools that they've heard about too, feel free to put it in the chat.
I just want to highlight CPS created this amazing remote guidance that has some recommendations for each discipline. And there are some great recommendations in the theater section, like how to kind of do script analysis or even a cold reading or performing in place. So there's some really great and tactical, tangible recommendations in that guidance. And I know that's available to everyone, even outside of the CPS district.
Yeah, that is a great resource. And I think we put it in the chat, but we'll drop it in again so people have the link. If it's okay with all of you, I don't want to contribute to screen fatigue, but if we could sneak in one last question, if that's okay with everybody, we'll go from there. We had a question about, I think an important one about students with disabilities. And they mentioned, Courtney, your experience because of the hybrid nature of what you're teaching, but I think this also applies to remote too. But how do you support students with disabilities in either a hybrid or a remote situation when you're teaching the arts?
Well, flexibility, 100%. Again, most of our students with severe disabilities are actually in school with us, which is lovely. I can say that students wearing masks, those of you who are worried about kids coming back to school with masks, the kids are way better at it than the adults are. I very seldom during the day have to say, please put your mask up. And the reason I'm saying that is because we have severe and profound students that have no problem keeping their mask on during the day. So when people bring up, and I know this is not exactly your question, Jonathan, but when people bring up about masks and things like that, if a student that has very few verbal skills and very little cognitive ability can keep their mask on and still react and do things with me on an individual basis, then any of us adults in this world can do that as well. Because with, and like I said, most of the kids that are severe and profound are in person with me. And this year I'm now able to see them one-on-one, which is really nice because I've been able to really tailor everything I'm doing to their individual skill sets, whether they're verbal, they're nonverbal, their physical capabilities. So we almost do some OT kind of things with them in some ways, with some of them that have trouble with maybe their hands, or they can't hold on to things, or just movement is an issue. So I've been able to tailor a lot of my lessons, and I'm very lucky in that respect. We don't have a lot of students right now that are in the remote that are with high disability, because they've been able to bring those kids to school. They have self-contained those kids this year just to take away exposure. Normally they would go in and out of other classrooms, but they are more in a self-contained situation. A lot of it has to do with students' contact tracing. So those students are in a more self-contained situation. There are pluses and minuses of that, obviously, just like there are pluses and minuses in going in and out of classes. So I have been lucky in that respect. Our special ed department is also any students with IEPs and things like that. They Zoom individually with those students. If they're remote, they are Zooming individually with those students. And they're going through music lessons with them, my music slides, or if they need help, reading some of the slides with that, those special ed teachers are going through those things with them. I'm not sure I got to all of, yeah, it's that's a tough one, it is tough, because we want to make sure that we're still providing those, that kind of education for those students, and not leaving them behind, and that affects that equity and access kind of piece. I feel like in some ways my kids, I have some students with autism that they're actually doing some of the things that I'm able to do with them. The two of us together is unbelievable to me, and I'm just blown away by their ability to react to music that when they were with the other kids in their classrooms, I didn't always have a chance to see that reaction with them, and to see how music was the one thing that they would, they leave my room and they sing nonstop the song maybe I sang. Now my regular teacher's crazy, but they may sing the song that I sing, but if I go in the hallway, they're singing it in the same key that I sing it in. And so it's almost a perfect pitch kind of situation with them. And just to see how those students are reacting, which I didn't honestly have the chance when they have been in with regular classes. I didn't have that chance to really see what their capabilities were. I think, when they do go back into the regular classes, I'm excited for the opportunity to, now I know a little bit more. I was able to learn a little bit more about them even, so I can start tailoring those lessons even closer for when they're with the regular kids in the classrooms. I'm not sure if I answered everything, but there you go.
Thank you, Courtney. We've gone a little bit over, and I hope that's okay. But I want to thank you, Brenda and Lindsey and Courtney and Nicole. We've learned a lot from you in a short time, and we really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today. We also want to thank some of our partners. We have some great partners in terms of ILMEA and IAEA, CPS and Ingenuity, Free Street Theater, and of course the Illinois Arts Council Agency. So we thank you very much for the work that you've done. And then finally, for those of you who are teachers, whether classroom teachers or arts partners or working for museums, we also just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing during this really important time. Thanks a lot, and enjoy the rest of the One State Conference, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks to all of you.